Perfect? Oh, bang on my chest if you think I'm perfect. Go ahead, bang on it. Beautiful. What a nickel. It's empty. The tinsmith forgot to give me a heart.
Okay, so another thing that I've kind of noticed with the industry, and I think, David, you're probably going to have a better insight on this, is I see a lot of writers in comic books that are trying to emulate what they're seeing in streaming shows. And like when I see a streaming show, a lot of them are like 8 or 10-hour movies. They're really decompressed stories. Like if you took The Mandalorian, you could cut that down and make a really, really cool 2.5-hour live action movie.
Yeah.
But for the streaming show, it's compressed out and it's like 8 hours. And I see a lot of comic writers trying to write, for that format where it's really decompressed, but people don't receive comics like they do on their streaming platforms. Netflix, you binge. I think Disney actually had like a release dates, but it was still fairly compressed where you could get the whole thing and watch it in a matter of days. Whereas, on an 8-issue comic story, that's almost a year. So that decompressed storytelling doesn't really translate well, in my opinion, to comic book writing.
It's funny you say that. It's about pace and it's about pacing. I was talking to another creator and we were talking notes on a story, and he gave me an outline, and I told him for the first issue. And I said, your first 7 pages here is your first issue. The 7 pages is actually your first 22, 24. And I love that. A great example is The Outsider, and I felt the same way as you did about The Mandalorian. As with The Outsider, I felt it's based on a single Stephen King novel, and it's 10 episodes or 9 episodes of a movie. And I love that kind of space to unpack the story. I totally hear what you're saying about comics readers are accustomed to a different kind of pace. And one of the things that we did in Canto, I understand about how fast you read comics, and you can read a 20-page issue in 10 minutes, and then you got to wait another month for the next 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's murder for your soul. But one of the things that we really tried to do was slow down. Sometimes you want to slow the reader down. And one of the things, I can give you an example specifically in Canto a technique we used to.
I remember. Hickman does something similar where he has all these inserts and he makes you read along. And you guys had you had an extra story that was part of the narration. It was like an extra fairy tale. Yeah, and it was all prose.
And then there's this page. I love to use this example. This page that's nothing but black, and it's dialogue between Canto and the girl he loves, right? Mm-hmm. And then you turn the page, and there's no dialogue, and it's just pictures over here. We could have easily combined those 2 pages to have that dialogue be on the page with the pictures, but the comic reader, just reads the dialogue, maybe glances at the pictures and keeps going. But when you separate out the dialogue into a blank page and then the pictures in another page, you actually cause the reader to take 2 beats, read the dialogue, then look at the pictures. And so I think the problem is not necessarily the spacing out of comics. It's trying to get the reader to follow the pace that you want them to follow, and using whatever tools are in your toolbox to do that.
The other thing is, for me personally, Black Sad is a huge influence on me. When I read that book, I can read, I was like, I can read a single issue in 20 minutes. I had to stop and process what I was looking at because the images are so dense and there's so much information. And when I finished it for the first time, I was like, that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to slow the reader down to the point that they not only feel like they got the story that they paid for, but that they invested their time in it in a way that is fulfilling to them. Because I am not unaware that I am competing for your time with video games, with movies, with any number of other sources of entertainment and media. To me, it really has to. I want people to be able to get lost in the images that we're creating, and a huge part of that is how me and David go back and forth on how to pace this whole thing out for people.
Yeah, and the single issues is it's the single issue lag is really about that moment in time, because 2019 Canto had 6 issues and they came out monthly, and now we have the trade, and there's never again anybody who's going to pick up this first arc and have to wait. Have to wait until the next chapter. So to keep the comics readers, it's important to keep the monthly Wednesday Warriors involved in the story. But after that arc is done, it's really more about balancing what does it feel like as a complete unit versus what does it feel like as individual parts.
So I don't know if you guys, I know, David, you worked at Vault Comics before, and I do want to talk to you a little bit about that here in a moment. Have you read it? It's called, I think it's Black Stars Above.
I haven't read it yet.
So when you read that one, you cannot read an issue of that in 10 or 15 minutes. It's like a 30-minute comic read, because I believe I think it's Lonnie Nadler is the writer, but he uses letters is part of his narrative technique, and there's so much information and there's so many trippy images in there, you can't just breeze through it. And he's like really effective using that technique to make, like, you can't go through it like that. You have to, and he's really effective at it on that one.
That's the challenge, right? Is there's a lot of, Drew, you have this experience too. You got a lot of family and friends who don't read comics. Mm-hmm. I used to. And the real big challenge is to try to bring in new people who don't read comics, who don't. It's a language. Reading comics is learning to read a new language of an interaction of words and pictures.
Yeah.
And something like Black Stars Above, which you're talking about, Wes, is gorgeous. Things like Sandman. I'm reading all of the original Sandman trades right now. I love them, but I know how to read comics. If you didn't, this was your first thing you picked up, you probably would hate comics and never pick up another one again. So,
oh yeah. So like Saga the Swamp Thing is like my second or third favorite comic story I've ever read in my life. But Saga the Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah.
If that was your first comic book you ever read, like, you would be nope. It's too complex, and the imagery is too interesting.
You don't know how things interact on the page. You don't know how to assume read order and all those different things.
People always say Watchmen's like the book they should give people. I'm like, that is the absolute last book on the planet you should be reading.
No, absolutely not. You should. There's some. I would go with the recent, the Superman Rebirth. I think would be a great entry point for anybody. Just because it's Superman, it's Lois, they have a kid. It's all about their family life. A lot of people can relate to that. We were all kids at one point. We all had, parents. So those are easy themes that you can get into, and everyone kind of knows who Superman is. You go in there on Watchmen, you're gonna be like,
crazy. Our big recommendation to people is Lock and Key.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lock and Key is, I do think it balances between new readers and people who are versed in comics, because it's a story that you can relate to, and the visuals are they're beautiful but easy to follow, and
it teaches you how to read too, because volume 1 and 2, well, volume 1 especially is very straightforward. Volume 2 adds in some elements. By the time you get to the end of the book or the end of the series, they are doing all sorts of wild stuff, but the book has taught you how to read it already. So
you start with your training wheels, and by the end, you're on a dirt bike.
Exactly.
So, David, like I mentioned before, you worked at Vault Comics, and I think that the Wassels are doing that's my favorite publisher right now. Almost everything they put out is just dynamite, whether it's science fiction, especially their horror stuff. What is it about those guys and what they put together at the Vault that really kind of like brings that to life? Because I was just shocked at the amount of the quality literally across the line.
Well, yeah, it's been remarkable, their growth over, I think it's like 2.5 years now. Um, I think from knowing them personally, I think it comes from a lifelong passion for comic books and having a vision of the kind of comics they wanted to make and read. Finding a the market was lacking these really high quality sci-fi and fantasy stories, and filling it. And I think that Adrian is a phenomenal editor. So he really gets in the weeds. We worked on I had a first book, Powerless, that we got in the weeds and we really picked it apart and put it back together. And he taught me how to create comics when I never had done it before. And I think it's that vision and that involvement with each book and the passion for it that has, and it's obviously come through because people just, love what they put out. Creators want to work with them. Shops want to, stock the books. And, it's been pretty remarkable. I was there at the beginning back in, I think, 2017. And to see this trajectory,
it's crazy. It almost feels like Valiant when it relaunched under Dinesh Shamdasani in 2012, and he was discovering, Robert Venditti, who's my favorite writer, obviously, for Exo Man of War, and then Matt Kent really, I think he'd already done Mind Management, but it really put him also on the map. They were discovering like all these great writers who hadn't really had their break. And it was just like the best universe, and Bolts doesn't really have a universe. But Ram V is now working on Justice League Dark, and I think the artist, I can't remember his name right now, but he's also doing some stuff for DC. And Michael Morrissey, I'd seen him do like some one-offs, but now that he's worked on the plot, he's probably going to be getting a lot more work as well.
Sure.
Mike never stops working.
What's that?
Mike never stops working.
Well,
He's always got 40 books on going at some point. It's crazy.
He just got a it was supposed to be published, I think, in May, and it's been pushed, but the IDW Star Wars Adventures.
Yeah.
I think it was Clone Wars, supposed to be 4 or 5 issues. And so that's getting kicked down the line, but Mike was was writing that. So
that's the bad thing about the Philippines. I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of his because he actually wrote one of my favorite issues of Nightwing ever. It's a one shot. It's Nightwing. I believe it's 43. It's Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne and Arsenal are out on the town, and you can kind of see how they're kind of Arsenal and Damian are kind of jostling for Dick's affection, because they kind of both feel like he's their big brother or something. It was just like the greatest. Like when I got done with it, I was like, why don't they just make a team book with these three? Because I enjoyed it so much. So I would be all over. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, obviously, with the shirt. But because I'm in the Philippines,
I don't know if Mike is super into Star Wars though.
Because I'm in the Philippines, I can't get the IDW Adventures books.
No, I know Mike is extremely passionate about Star Wars. In fact, right here, I don't know, probably can't see it, but I have his 2 prose novels he wrote, Black Star Renegades and We Are Mayhem.
Nice.
Homage to
but it's going to be excellent. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat po, and I'm out.